To move the motion.
Good morning, Mr. Lee. It's a great pleasure to be under your chairpersonship. I'm here today to talk about HS2 and in particular funding for Wales in terms of the railways. And I think the first thing to say is that we're all aware that tomorrow the Chancellor's got his budget. We're all aware that next week we've got COP26. And also that the government's been talking about connecting the Union, about levelling up and net zero. So if we think about all these together, I think there's a sort of compelling case that the Chancellor should be looking at giving Wales our fair Barnet consequential akin to the Scottish one in order that we can tool up, gear up, connect up and help move UK towards net zero with more rail investment. The situation is that in the Welsh Affairs Select Committee that some of us serve upon, we've recently recommended that we do get the same Barnet consequential share as Scotland. Simply put, Scotland gets 91.7% actually of their share of the total cost of HS2 as a population proportion. So in other words, in the event that Wales got 91.7% of our 5% share of HS2, in the event that HS2 is 100 billion, for argument's sake, Wales would get something in the region of 4.6 billion. And if HS2 ended up costing twice that, and there are, I'm sure we'll hear from the Minister soon, but we've heard that the projected costs have moved from 38 billion to 100 billion, and now they're talking about 160 to 200 billion. In that event, we would get something in the region of 9.2 billion. The thing about HS2, of course, it is intrinsically, obviously it's a UK scheme, but it's a north-south spinal scheme. And so it will clearly benefit Scotland more than it will Wales. So one could argue we should have a higher proportionate share than Scotland, but that isn't what I'm arguing. I'm simply arguing that we get our fair share. In terms of HS2 itself, and I know the Minister is a great expert in HS2, in terms of the timing, Phase 1 was originally going to be 2027, it's saying kick forward to 2033, and the latest news from Andrew Biden MP was that we're looking at something like 2041. So in terms of the timescale for action that is being projected by COP26, we really do need to get a move on. And there's a very strong case that Wales should have its share of the money to actually get on with shovel-ready schemes, both in North and South Wales, to help build productivity, to help build connectivity, to help levelling up, and to help deliver net zero. We know in terms of HS2, the lead section has been cancelled. And we also know that, in terms of the amount of concrete that's going to be built, it's going to take 100 years to become carbon neutral. And 2/3 of the woodlands cut down will be burnt by dracs, which again is an issue about carbon and an issue about air quality. But let's assume it is going ahead, full throttle, namely Phase 1 might be over by 2041. Then we, in Wales, I think we've got a case to get moving now and get schemes delivered on the ground. I should say, and disclose, people may know that a long time ago I was the leader of Croydon Council. And the reason I mention that is at the time I delivered a scheme, the Tramlink scheme, which is the light rail electrified orbital tram system, which is 26 kilometres long, connecting Beckenham, Croydon and Wimbledon. And that cost 200 million gross, but 100 million net, because it was a public-private partnership. So that scheme, which connected up 3 constituencies, only cost 100 million to the Exchequer. And we're talking now, of course, about 100 billion. So obviously there are 1,000 of these schemes. So the point I'm making here is there's a lot to be said for small cluster-based schemes around the country, in particular on a east-west basis. And I'm talking about the Northern Powerhouse as well as the connectivity to Wales. And of course, all importantly, within Wales. The situation in terms of relative competitiveness is that I can go from London to Manchester in 2 hours 10 and go from London to Swansea in about 3 hours. And now with HS2, if it does happen, we'll be able to get to Manchester in 1 hour. And so you've got to ask the question about, well, what are investors going to do? And we've already seen Virgin sort of pull out of Swansea and go to Manchester because of this. And KPMG had said, OK, they did a study some years ago that, just I will in the saying that, we're looking to lose tens of thousands of jobs from South Wales unless we get some investment of our own to connect up, in particular, the clusters of, Swansea and westwards with Cardiff, with Bristol, to make that engine turn faster. Yeah, I certainly will give way.
Just to return to the point, and I'm very grateful that he made just to return to the point that he made on the speeds and the time, and which he made earlier on. And it just seems to me that what is the rationale that the Severn Tunnel should be the dividing line? To the east of the Severn Tunnel, you can travel at 125 miles an hour, but we are supposed to accept, for some reason, that to the west of the Severn Tunnel, 100 miles an hour at best is the speed that we will accept. Why should we accept that as a rationale at the time when the other times for travelling are being so spectacularly improved?
Yeah, I agree with my right honourable friend completely. And obviously, there are engineering and geographic issues here in terms of, Brunel originally had a straight line going through to Swansea, which would have been half an hour, and clearly it loops up. It used to loop up to pick up coal and this sort of thing. But one of the issues about time, of course, is that if you increase frequency, you reduce average time. And I think there's, to be honest, on HS2, the Minister may have a different view, I appreciate, but I think there's too much focus on getting a few extra minutes of time, when what we really need with HS2, perhaps, is greater capacity, greater, bigger trains and thicker tracks or whatever, not necessarily going faster. Because if I can go to Edinburgh in 3 hours, which is the same time it takes me to get to Swansea, do I really want to spend 100 billion or 200 billion to get that extra bit of time? And in the meantime, because I know members will talk about the benefits for Wales, it's sad to say that the current plan will not have a direct link between Crewe and Manchester that would help Wales. And of course, as we know from our own line, after we zoom through to Bristol, then to Cardiff. Obviously, there's a number of smaller stations, and obviously the train's got to stop and start and this sort of stuff. So, of course, in an HS2 case, if they had lots and lots of different stations, then clearly would have to stop all the time. So they've ruled them out. But it does mean that people have got to travel a long way to get to HS2 and connect with it. And certainly, if we don't have this Crewe connection, which we won't, then the benefits to... just one moment, I will. Then the benefits to Wales will be very small, and much less than Scotland. So basically, my minimum ask really is that we agree the Welsh Affairs Select Committee, joint party report that said we should get the same share as Scotland, as opposed to more, because Scotland will benefit and we'll lose out. I certainly give way.
I'm sure it was an omission by my honourable friend, because he's Welsh, that the Cambrian line, of course, the line that goes through the heart of mid-Wales, goes to Birmingham. And would he reflect about the hub of Birmingham and how that impacts in terms of Wales and HS2? He's talked about Crewe, Manchester, Bristol, but mid-Wales looks east to west, and that Birmingham exchange is incredibly important to my constituents.
Yeah, it's a very important point an honourable member makes. Overall, having a fast link north to south along the spine of the United Kingdom is good for the United Kingdom. I'm saying, and obviously the connections with Birmingham are important as well, as the members mentioned. My central point is we're going to spend all this money, and Scotland will benefit much more than Wales. We should get our fair share. That's a minimal point. And my secondary point is that there's a lot of shovel-ready schemes available, that a lot of them which have been devised by the Welsh Government, that are ready to roll. That if we are serious about being a union and connecting the union and building productivity, then we should do just that. So the situation in terms of productivity, of course, is that unfortunately, in Wales, the gross value added is something like 70%. In other words, the average wages something like 70% of the UK average. And that, of course, productivity is generated by skills, technology, access to markets, and investment. And the productivity of the actual line is low. And traditionally, the formula for investing money by the Department of Transport has been, in terms of its cost-benefit analysis, rewards previous investment. Because if somewhere in the southeast people have got expensive houses because the train network is made to basically spoke into London all the time, more and more, so people can live in, work in London and live further and further away with HS2 and other connectivity. What you do, obviously, Mr. Lee, is you sort of bid up the house prices. No one can afford to live in London. They spend half the time going back and forth on a train, using up a lot of carbon, and even if it's electrified, you've got to obviously provide the electricity somehow or other, and the energy of the world is being consumed. And so if there was a more regional basis, a cluster basis, taking advantage of what we all know now about Zoom technology to work from home and this sort of thing, then we perhaps should be looking post-pandemic and post the sort of Zoom technology and in our new environment, how best we can spend money on building localised economies quicker rather than much more grandiose schemes in the long term. I'm not speaking against as such, but it does seem to me we need to bring forward these projects. In terms of net zero, the Minister will know that in Paris we're trying to deliver a 1.5 degree maximum increase. But the latest projections are that we're already at 1.2, and by 2025 we'll be at 1.5 degrees. And in fact, over Europe, it's already 2 degrees. And over the Arctic, it's already 3 degrees because there's more heat over land than sea, which is why 8,500 tonnes of ice are melting every second that we speak today. So we are running out of time. I'm not pretending our schemes in Wales can save the world, but we all need to think about how to do what we can as soon as we can. In terms of the investment, finally, that we've had in Wales, again, the Minister will know that in terms of rail enhancements over the last couple of decades, we've only had about 1.5% of the UK share for 5% of the population, something like 11% of the rail track. In recent times, David Cameron, I ran a big campaign as the Swansea West MP since 2010 to get rail electrification to Swansea. David Cameron said he'd deliver it. And then I think something happened to David Cameron. And then we didn't get it. And then there was argued, oh, well, it won't be a very big increase in line speed. But, of course, what we need is frequency and electrification so we get a better service and we get a greener future. So that's something we need to come back to. Wales, obviously, because we've left the EU, Wales has got 60% of its exports to the EU. And so, we do need the support. And in terms of economic clusters, I'd say to the Minister that if you take Swansea, Cardiff and Bristol city regions, combined they're 3 million people. Similarly, Leeds and Manchester are 3 million people. But Leeds and Manchester get something like 8 services an hour, and we get about 1. So the issue really is that, and this is coming out in the Hendy Review, etc., I'm sure, but the issue here is that we should be connecting up, and this isn't being nationalist in some sense, but connecting up with Bristol and the South West to create economic prosperity for both South Wales and the South West. And we need that investment in railways now. I know that the Lee Waters, the Transport Minister, and Julie James, of course, in the Welsh Assembly have come forward with detailed schemes on how to provide a South Wales metro, and what that both in the southeast, in the central and moving west. And in essence, what we're talking about here is an integrated transport system, Mr. Lee, which would connect up light rail with electric buses, or with electrified trains, even hydrogen-powered trains, in a way that people can easily get on to public transport in a way that they aren't waiting for hours and hours and is unreliable and infrequent. Then they will switch from car usage. And I'll be interested in what the Minister's got to say about this, because we do need, if we're serious about net zero, to move towards a situation. It's all very well saying people must go on public transport, but for people to go on public transport, it needs to be close to the home, it needs to be frequent, it needs to be affordable, it needs to be comfortable, and they will make that shift if the fiscal strategy is there. So I'd urge him to urge the Chancellor to do that, and I'm happy to work with him to do that, and with my other colleagues. But I know other members will want to speak, so I'm shortly going to wind up. Mr. Lee, as you'll be maybe thankful to hear. I should mention finally that the Minister may or may not be aware of the Blue Eden project that's just coming out of Swansea, which is a very innovative project about tidal energy combining with floating eco-houses, believe it or not, solar energy, capturing in batteries energy. And the point I'm trying to make here is there is a great appetite for creative innovation to deliver net zero, both in Swansea and Wales and beyond. And part of that must be the investment in a rail infrastructure and public transport that's environmentally friendly, that's people friendly, that's affordable, and to build productivity to help Britain deliver net zero, higher productivity and better prosperity for all. Thank you very much.